we're going to talk about using sources in speech. I'm going to walk you through ways to find sources. I'm going to walk you through how to use them in your speech, creative ways to help the audience relate to your information, and then finally, how to report your references in an APA guide. I'm going to imagine that I'm doing a speech on Keurig coffee makers. Perhaps I'm going to demonstrate how to use one, or I'm going to persuade you that you should buy one. But the first place I started was surfing the internet and found Keurig online, and they have a quick start guide. And I found the following facts. And I want to show you a little bit about how you report that information. So the first quote I have is, according to the Keurig Quick Start Brewing Guide, it is best to keep your brewer on at all times. That way the water is heated and you can make your coffee quickly. So one of the ways you can do it is report your research before the actual information. The other way is you can report your research after the information, as in the second example. The electrical usage to keep on your brewing system is the equivalent of a 60-watt light bulb, according to the Keurig Quick Start Guide. So either way, you can report it before or after. And at the bottom of the page, I include what that reference would look like in APA. The way that I found that was I typed in OWL, O-W-L, Purdue, and then I typed in APA brochure, and it showed me quickly how I cite a brochure in APA format. The other thing I want to highlight about this is many textbooks will tell you to report every bit of your reference, and this is where I differ from the textbooks. It's boring. If you say, according to Keurig, 2003 Keurig Quick Start B 100 single cup brewing system, the brochure from their website online, and then you give me the information, by the time you've got to the end of the reference, I am bored and I am asleep and I have quit paying attention. So my advice to you is to find what is the most interesting part of the reference, what is the most credible part of the reference, what is it that will make the audience think the most and trust you more with that information. So in this case, the Keurig Quick Start Guide, that says, oh, that's directly from the company, I should listen. Let's look at another example. I found this information by going to the University of Arkansas Library, going to EBSCO, and then I typed in coffee and health. And the quote that I pulled, a 2012 article in Food Chemistry, says that adding milk to coffee decreases its antioxidant capacity. So Food Chemistry sounds like an important journal. I mentioned the 2012 because it shows that I'm relevant. Some science is going to change over time, and by saying that this science comes from 2012 lets you know it's the most recent current. But I want you to look at the top. I want you to look at the list of names. First, I don't think I could pronounce those names. So it's sometimes you can just avoid having to pronounce those. But I also want you to look at the long citation there. Can you imagine if I would have read that entire citation to you, just how bored you'd be? So again, when quoting research, pick that will give you the most credibility. In this case, Food Chemistry, the periodical, and the date, 2012. The other thing I want you to notice real quick with the reference is how the second line and every other line is indented. I think if there was one thing that new users of APA miss, they miss indenting that line. Now, I found this APA reference when I went to the library EBSCO. On the side, it has a button you can click that says Cite, and it will automatically put your sources in APA for you, and you cut and paste and put in your reference page. But it will not indent that second line. So again, I'm reminding you, make sure you indent the second line. And here I've put together two examples. I just took that same citation. The first one is correct. If you'll notice, the second line is indented. And the last one is incorrect. If you'll notice, the second and corresponding lines are not indented. It's a real easy thing to do. Most word processors, you simply right-click, push paragraph, and then there's a drop-down box. And if you put hanging indent, it'll automatically, and then highlight everything on that page, it will automatically indent that second line for everything on your page. Let's look at another way to use references. I love quotes, and so in this particular case, I Googled coffee quote, trying to find a good quote that maybe I would start my speech with or end my speech with. And so the question is, how would it be different if you started a speech with a quote or ended a speech with a quote? Let's look at the first one. Only one thing is certain about coffee. Wherever it is grown, sold, brewed, and consumed, there will be lively controversy, strong opinions, and good conversation. This quote by Mark Pendergrass exemplifies many of the great attributes of coffee. Remember, the most important thing when you start a speech is grabbing the audience's attention. So start with the quote and then add the person's name. The converse is true at the end. You want the last sentence to be the most interesting. So in this case, you're going to say the person's name before the quote. In conclusion, Mark Pendergrass said it best. Only one thing is certain about coffee. Wherever it is grown, sold, brewed, and consumed, there will be lively controversy, strong opinions, and good conversation. And you can see the difference. Again, pick what's the most important that we should hear and plan accordingly. I wanted to show you what a reference might look like for a web page that contains quotes. In this particular case, the name of the organization is Spilling the Beans Chicago. I went to the bottom of the web page and I found the date that web page was put together. The title on the web page itself was Funny Coffee Quotes and Coffee Sayings, and then I added the words retrieved from and then the web address for the particular quote. The other thing I want to draw your attention to is there's no period at the end of the web address. That is a consistent thing for APA. You never put a period at the end. That way, if later somebody has it electronically and wants to click on it, it'll actually go to that particular web address. If you put a period there, then it might mess it up so the web address won't work. Let's look at another example of ways that you would take research, say it in your speech, and relate it in your speech. This particular quote came from the National Coffee Association. In order to find this quote, I Googled the words coffee and statistics. And it wasn't the first thing that came up, but I looked at the first things that did come up, and it seemed to be more just random websites as opposed to an organization that I felt like I could trust and know where the research came from. So in this particular case, I did find the National Coffee Association, and I actually found it through Harvard University's website, and then linked over to that. So again, I felt like I was using two reliable sources, and that's going to be really big with web research, that you make sure that you don't just go for the first one, but you go for the reliable one. So the National Coffee Association reports that the average price of an espresso-based drink is $2.45, while the average price for a brewed cup of coffee is $1.38. Keurig coffee is about 69 cents per cup, and even less if you use a refillable filter. So there's a lot of information in there, and frankly, it's a good opportunity for the audience to go to sleep if you don't find ways to relate it. So I was brainstorming. One of the things you could do is have 3 coffee cups, paper coffee cups, and on one you could write the number 245 and hold it up, and then 138, and then 69 cents, and then set them side by side so the audience could see same cup, different price. Another way you could relate the information is to involve the audience. So you might actually write those 3 numbers on the board and actually, tease who's good at math here, and have them come up and actually have them do the math in front of the class to see the price difference between the 245 and the 69 cents. And then if you even wanted to get more advanced, you could say on average Americans have 3 cups of coffee a day. They could figure out what 3 cups of coffee a day costs for each one times the days in the year, and you could actually do an annual number. You could do that on a slideshow where you already have it worked out, but sometimes I find that playing with the audience engages them a little bit more, or even you doing the math in front of them. And then the other thing, of course, is just to come up with a creative PowerPoint. And there's lots of graphics out there where you could just have a really nice cup of coffee with each one of those amounts underneath it, and you could show the math. This next slide comes from the same source, the National Coffee Association. Let's look at some creative ways to use this information. I might say in my speech, the National Coffee Association reports that 54% of Americans over the age of 18 drink coffee every day, and on average, an American drinks 3.1 cups of coffee a day. Creative ways I might do this. Since it says that we drink 3 cups of coffee, I just might set out 3 coffee cups, just to let everyone visualize that. I could even get really creative and show some sort of a slide that had 3 coffee cups a day, multiplied the number of days in a year, and shows all the individual cups to represent, so we could see a visual of just how many that is. Another thing is I might tell everybody please raise your hand if you had a cup of coffee today, and then say, please raise however many fingers for how many cups of coffee. If you had 3 cups, raise 3 fingers, and so on. And look around the class and acknowledge the fact that your audience already does drink coffee and that this relates to them in some way. Having the audience participate in some way by raising their hands, writing on the board is always an engaging way to keep them alert to your topic. The other thing you can do is, since the statistic says 54% of Americans, you might look at the class, and if you have 18 students, you might say, okay, approximately 10 to 11 of you drink coffee every day. And then if you actually count them out or point to that section of the class, again, it helps people to visualize your statistic and be engaged with the research that you're talking about. And as I've already mentioned, you can be real creative with those sorts of PowerPoints, making charts or showing individual cups of coffee to help us visualize that information. So we've talked a little bit about finding information. I shared with you ways that you can report that information in your speech. We talked about how to mention the most interesting part of the research. You don't have to mention every single thing. So at the bottom of this slide, you can see the citation is the National Coffee Association's National Coffee Drinking Trends and the date. At this point, the National Coffee Association is the most credible part of this research, so that's what I mentioned. Now I want to show you a sample reference page because it's often that students will do a really good job of writing the APA out, or at least finding a wizard that will do it for them. And then they put it together on a reference page, and there's some problems. And so I want to share with you the most common problems. First, I want you to look down the page and notice that the second line is indented and any corresponding line for each reference. The next thing I want you to notice that the word references is written on the top of the page. It is centered. It is in regular size text. It is not underlined. It is not bolded. It is simply centered. There is no extra spaces between it and the rest of your references. The other thing I want you to notice is that the references are alphabetized. And then finally, I want you to notice that every reference is double spaced and there are no extra spaces between the references. In speech, we often refer to ethos, pathos, and logos as being foundational for every speech. First, ethos, personal credibility. Why you are credible to talk about this particular topic. And you need to be very upfront with the audience, saying, I've researched this, I've experienced this, I am passionate about this. You tell us your connection. That's the first part of ethos. The second part of ethos is where we see and we hear you using good research, good sources, information that is reliable and trustworthy, and we trust the resources, and therefore we trust you. The next thing you need to include in all your speeches is pathos or pathos, depending on which dictionary you look up the pronunciation in. And it has to do with emotion. Every speech should include your passion for a particular topic. you need to share emotion, even if it's about coffee. My husband gets very emotional about his coffee. It is a big deal for him. He has friends that it's even a bigger deal. So, however you can include it, whether it's the passion for coffee. On the other hand, my father has a passion for good deals. So you could highlight the benefits of the price differences. Other people I know are very big into health, and that's what they're passionate about. So I might be able to make them excited about the antioxidant qualities of coffee. So I'm going to show that I'm credible, ethos. I'm going to tap into emotions, pathos, and then finally logos. I'm going to use logic, which is mostly what we've been talking about here, using facts, data, statistics, all of that information. And when put together, ethos, pathos, and logos, they really make for a powerful speech. So in conclusion, I found a quote that I thought was a lot of fun as a last thought on research. And it's from a Hungarian biochemist. And he said, research is to see what everybody else is seeing and to think what nobody else has thought.